and our Public Works Director, Maria DeAndrea, is here to discuss this plan and this analysis and alternative feasible study. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to introduce some of the Calibre staff who is here tonight. First to my right is Greg Murphy, who is the project manager. He's also the president of Calibre. Emily Valine is running the computer tonight for us. She's with the Calibre staff as well. And in the back row here is Jess Allen, an engineer with Calibre who did quite a bit of work on the project. So what we'll plan to do is walk through the PowerPoint. So if you recall, instead of presenting the report in a true paper format, this was actually developed as a website. And so we want to spend some time actually walking through the website, showing that and all the information that's on there. It is quite robust, and our plan is within the next few days plan, and he and Emily will tag team to walk through the website itself.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Barentine.
So is council not going to get the actual report? It's just going to be on their website? We're not going to get that?
There is no report. The deliverable is the website.
Sorry, the microphone wasn't on. So go ahead, say that again.
Yeah, the deliverable is a website. That's the product.
The product is fully a website around this particular study.
Right.
It's an interactive website, right?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
all the same information you would have in a report is there on the site. It just gives us the ability to access some of the data a lot cleaner, a lot more different ways that we can access it. So it's a much easier format to navigate, much more rich, in terms of data that can be.
The reason I ask that is that on the end of this, the conclusion says that the staff will review the results of the study, and it was my understanding that we were going to be reviewing your report, and so that makes it rather difficult because we never got it.
We will see the report here tonight in terms of the website. So I think one of the other elements, and we'll see this.
Is that the PowerPoint that we received here?
No.
No.
It's
Okay.
the actual website. But I think when you zoom into a particular property, you'll see how valuable having that electronic access will be. Instead of, as you probably saw in the PowerPoint, we're seeing very large scale maps that you can't see a lot of the detail, whereas with the website, you can really drill into specific locations.
Okay, then my concern would just be that as we're drilling in, we're going to be doing things anecdotally and not necessarily more of a report style to where we can kind of keep that information and wrap our heads around it. Is there any kind of report from your website that the city's going to be putting together or that they're going to be putting together?
No, it will just be
All
a
right.
link to this website.
No, we can easily print the web pages and assemble them as a document if you're more comfortable reviewing a document in writing, so that can be done.
Mm-hmm. We'll see how this process. Okay.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No. Hey, Sam.
It's not advancing, I think.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. There we go. So if you recall, we initiated this study back in September of 2018, and the project was really focused on three major components, one being life safety and flood proofing, which was the initial effort to try and just get out and evaluate homes. Secondly, the outfall system plan update and prioritization. There had been a previous OSP prepared in 1999, so that was about reaching then almost 20 years old. And then finally, the pipe condition assessment of the Oxford pipe that runs from east of Santa Fe all the way to the South Platte River along Oxford Avenue. So the study goals and objectives were to identify both short-term and long-term solutions to flooding, and really to identify what's the biggest bang for the buck that we can get if the city was to move forward with investment of some sort in preventing or reducing stormwater impacts. So again, the focus then was to identify areas of potential flooding, determine and define ways of reducing flood damage through flood proofing. Basically, those three elements that I just talked about, assessing the current conditions of the pipe below Oxford, and updating the existing outfall system plan. So the study scope, you can see here on the map, there were three primary areas that were focused on, the south and south central. Then there was the north and what was called the Yale Basin, as well as the Central Basin. And taken together, that comprises about 3.5 square miles, and the whole city, as you know, is about 6.6. So this represents just about half of the city. And these were based on originally the 1998 flood-prone study that had identified the
Or topographic features. So right now, Dr. Cog has detailed topographic mapping, and so we're able to bring that in and use it. Gives us a much better understanding of where water's going. So we know that we're not actually defining a floodplain. There's no FEMA definition of the floodplain out there. We're not putting anybody into the floodplain. What we're doing is estimating areas of inundation for various different storms. The other thing I wanted to mention is I think most people in here probably understand what we mean when we say a 100-year storm. That is a storm that has a 1% chance of occurring in any year. So if we have 10 storms in a year and we have 100 years, that's 1,000 storms. A 100-year storm might only happen once out of that grouping of storms, but it might happen twice in a row. It might happen twice in the same year, same week. So it's really not an estimation of whether that's going to happen. It's an estimation of what the likelihood is based on statistical analysis. And of course, Denver's only been here for 150 years. We've only been gathering rainfall data for part of that time. So the statistics don't necessarily bear out what the results are, but it's the best statistical analysis we can do, and that's what we use. So two different bases.
While you're getting to that website, is this now accessible to all of us?
Not
Or will you be
yet.
sending us a link?
Yeah, within the next couple of days, we'll be putting this out for the public, everybody to have access to it.
Thank you.
We can certainly send a link to the council and a password to get on it.
And then it will be made public as soon as we're, I mean, it's public
As
to
soon
everyone.
as you guys, give us the go-ahead as well. And this gives you a sense for why we thought it would be useful to do this as a website, because it's a lot easier and quicker to drill down to specific information that you might want to see. So let's back out of that. Let's pan down. There is, in the highlighted paragraph there, talks a little bit about understanding a storm event, puts it in terms of more everyday objects, so that's why that's there. There is some other guidance about flood proofing. What we wanted to do is have a step-by-step methodology that people might be able to go through. So that's what this section is, flood proofing guidance. There's 5 points there. Let me just read through those, Emily. So first one is consult the maps that are included herein so that you can kind of see what situation your property is in. Second one, of course, we're recommending that anybody who feels like they're in danger, or if the maps are indicating that they are in a flood-prone area, that flood insurance is available to everybody in this area. This is not a mapped FEMA floodplain. There's nothing that prohibits you from getting flood insurance, and it's actually at the cheapest rate for that reason. So you're getting the cheapest flood insurance that you can get. And I know there was a lot of people that lost a lot of assets due to this last storm, and that's something that people can do at a fairly low cost. The third one there, consult the flood proofing flow chart, so I showed you that. And then consult the City of Inglewood Public Works and the building departments before you proceed. A couple of other things, develop an emergency plan with your family, and obviously everyone needs to have an emergency plan for fire, but in cases like we've got where there are a lot of houses in the floodplain here, there really needs to be an emergency plan that includes flood action as well. There are some notes on the side there on flood insurance, also some links to the flood insurance manual and the flood insurance rates. And then the last link there is a link to some graphics of different floodproofing techniques that you might consider, so that it kind of shows you graphically things like improving your window wells, making changes like adding a sump pump into your house, those kinds of things. And so all that information is there for you to review. That's the floodproofing section. Was there another link there I missed, Emily? I'm thinking that I missed one. Let's go down. Up a little bit. No, I guess we hit everything. All right. And then let's go to the OSP. So an outfall systems plan deals with trying to find capital improvements projects that reduce flood hazard. So we're trying to estimate where the flood hazard is. We're trying to figure out what projects are needed where, what the capacities of the existing systems are. Again, it includes both a hydrologic analysis and a hydraulic analysis, and then an identification of projects and a prioritization of projects. The goals of the OSP update are listed there, and essentially it's flood hazard control. We have a number of maps that we've included. Let's pass that one, Emily. That's that can be seen a little clearer on a computer screen, but really not intended to be an interactive map. We do have detailed hydraulic and hydrologic information in a SWIM model that we won't go over here because it's technical information about the modeling, really for Maria and her staff to review. So let's go into the existing storm sewer capacity. Can I ask you a question? Sure.
Councilmember Berentine?
You said that was information that was technical and only for the staff to go through. Will that not be available on the site?
It will be available for the public too. Not only for the staff, I just didn't want to go into the details of the technical modeling here. I think anybody that's interested in it can go through it. So what this exhibit does is it illustrates the capacity of your storm sewer system, and it's a little bit difficult on the projector to see it, but on the left side of the screen there are a number of different check boxes which indicate or allow you to turn on and off storm sewer, different sections of storm sewer based on their amount of capacity. So Emily, if you turn them all off and leave the 5-year on, these are the storm sewer pipes that have less than 5-year capacity. So let's zoom in a little bit, see if we can see that better. So you can see the purple lines there. Those are all lines that are less than 5-year capacity. So they're flooding all the time. And if you pan a little bit east in that basin, you can see a lot of the places where flooding is occurring. Those are right where those severely undersized storm sewers are. And if we turn off the 5 and look at just the 100, so there are really only a few pipes within this entire area that are large enough to carry a 100-year storm. And those are located in such a way where the 100-year water cannot even get into those pipes because there are not enough inlets to absorb the water that's in the street already. So they're not really functioning as 100-year storm drains. And of course, this doesn't take into account the fact that some of the storm drains probably have debris in them. We know that they do because we've been inside of some of them. We've also got a lot of reports from citizens. So both inlets and storm sewers are under capacity. Let's back out of that one. So that's an interesting map. There are some other links to detailed hydrographs that you can look at if you would like some flow profiles, peak volumes, tables, those kinds of things. Again, they're fairly technical in nature. Anybody that wants to look at them can. Let's keep panning down. A number of different types of maps we wanted to include, again, to help give people a sense for what's happening on their property. I do want to note that the hydraulic analysis that was done was based on the latest topographic mapping.
I think we need you to be just a little further away from the mic.
Still.
There you go.
It was based on the best available topographic mapping. But there are a lot of details in any neighborhood that can't really be modeled. And specifically, we did input all the buildings, but there are so many different types of fences and fences on different property lines, and so many cars in people's yards. Those kinds of things can't be modeled effectively with the state of the art right now. So we know there are areas that were reported to be flooding that are not indicated in this map. Generally, it's shallow flooding in those areas, but we know that there are probably 5 or 6 places where there was reported flooding in the public outreach that don't necessarily show up here. So that's something that can be approximated a little bit, and so that's one thing that we need to talk with Maria about. We need to talk with the council about, and I think citizens also need to be aware of the limitations of the modeling. So let's go into 100-year flood boundaries. Let's zoom in here. So the buttons on the left side indicate the floodplain with various different levels of infrastructure. So if you click on, Emily, click off the buildings with 100-year boundaries. This is with the existing infrastructure in place. So let's look at like the 25-year. Let's click that other 25-year one. That's a little bit brighter colored. Turn the 125 off.
So is what you're clicking on are some of the ones that we have that are not a very, very good map in the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Could you, so you're on which one right now?
This is slides.
25? Okay.
Right after.
15?
Basically the, I don't have the sheets numbered, but it was right when we started the outfall systems plan update. So where it shows the 5, 10, 25, and 100-year
So this would be the
events.
central and south central basin?
Yes, correct.
So let's zoom in around Broadway, Emily. And then let's click the 25-year infrastructure button off and on. So you can see the change in the floodplain when we upgrade the storm sewer to 25-year. There's still a lot of houses in the floodplain, but there are a lot that have been taken out. And then go down and click on the buildings as well. A little bit hard to see that in here. You really have to look at it on a computer screen, but We also have the building envelope shown, and you can click on and off and look at the impact of the change as you add that 25-year infrastructure, how many buildings are taken out of the floodplain. And again, the reason we went to a web format is because it really allows you to do things like clicking layers on and off, and you get a much better sense for how the project is changing, changing the conditions. Okay, let's get out of that one. And then let's drop down to one more right there. Flood depth 5-year. So this map shows how deep the water is for given homes at the 5-year level. So let's go back to that same location on Broadway, if we can. If you can go down to where the fatality occurred, I guess, right there. Zoom in on that. And then let's, so if you look at the on the left side, there's a checkbox for 0 to 5 foot flood depth flooding. There's also a little tag there next to it with a color on it. So right there, the houses that are colored in that color are houses where 0 to 1 foot of depth of flooding is expected against their foundation. So you can see even in a 5-year flood, there are houses that are under a lot of water. So the 2 to 3 foot depth, there are some in the 2 to 3 foot depth range. If you can, click that on and off, you can see their houses. And this is right in the teeth of it. This is the worst area. And we can see that even in the least frequent storm that we analyzed, you still have problems there. So let's back out of that and let's go into the 100-year.
Go ahead.
Could you go back to where you were? Apologize, I couldn't do it fast enough. Okay, so I just want to clarify what you said, and that is that in the least amount, even with the minimal amount of water, that area there is more likely to flood.
It's, and significantly. So you'll have a significant amount of water in those houses once every 5 years for sure, and they're probably getting water against them much more frequently than that, every other year. And again, that's right where they just paved right over the drainage way. There's no allowance whatsoever for flows going through there, and water's just going from street to street across the back of people's lots.
All right, so you said the least amount of water that you did, these would be flooding for what you studied. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell has a question too.
Actually, more of a comment. And the comment is, I think there are people in that area that are paranoid every time it rains. I got a call the other night, the water was 2 foot deep on a coma. And because we are having a lot of rain this year, I think it's imperative that we deal, especially with that block, very soon.
I don't think anybody would disagree with you on that. This helps to confirm that what they're experiencing isn't just made up, it's for real. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go back to the 100-year. And then, Emily, can you zoom down where the where that cul-de-sac was, where they had some flooding. Yeah, right in there. So that's downstream of Rotolo Park. And you can see in a larger storm, most of the houses are going to have water at some level. What we discovered in talking to people and seeing photographs of that they had taken during the 2018 storm, it actually is probably worse than even the modeling indicates. So this only shows one of the houses over 1 to 2 feet deep. We saw at least that corner house that is 1 to 2 feet deep. For sure, they had photos that indicate it was deeper. We talked to the neighbors across the street and next door. They indicate that they're getting water quite frequently above their window wells, which is probably 1 foot depth, something like that. So we know that it is at least as bad as we're showing here, probably worse. All right, that's good on that one. Then let's go down to the proposed projects map. So this one has a number of pieces of information associated with it. If you click on a segment there, so that's the Oxford outfall. This will tell you what the estimated construction cost would be to get that pipe up to a 10-year design level, up to a 25-year design level. It also gives you a segment number, so that one is segment number. The name is S1, so that refers back to some of the other tables. The Acoma one is that one there. Click on that one, Emily, the pink one there. That one is S3. And so I think we need some input from the council, from the citizens on the prioritization there, because normally on a storm sewer system, you prioritize it to start from the downstream end and move up, because you don't want to improve the upstream, and by improving the upstream, create more concentrated flooding downstream. Typically, you're starting at the downstream end and going to upstream. And so the Oxford pipe, really, from that perspective, is a high priority pipe. We also know that there's a big public safety issue there because of the sinkholes that have developed, and could certainly have had fatalities there over time. So that one is a very high priority pipe, but the Acoma one has more impact to individual homes, and also probably quite frequently that happens. And you have the benefit there of having a little bit of open channel between that pipe system and the next one downstream. So that, where Emily's got the mouse there, is open channel. So hydraulically, they're not really connected. So you could do the S3 pipe first, and that's the Acoma one that Cheryl mentioned, or Councilman Wink mentioned. Yeah, so I think we can certainly prioritize that way. There's a lot of sense in doing that, but we wanted to just let you know that right now we're recommending S1, but we would certainly be in favor of moving that to S3 also. So this map gives you information about each pipe, what the cost of those systems are, where they're located. Okay, let's back out of that one. And then let's go to potential detention sites. Is that a link? So we did look at a number of different possible detention pond sites. They're going to be a little bit difficult to see on here, kind of in a pinkish color there. There are only a few places where you would even be able to do a detention pond, and most of those are located in areas that are too far upstream to really do a lot of good. The one there that's just south of Oxford in the big park, that one there, that one is large enough to have a meaningful impact, but unfortunately, because of how it's configured there and where it's at in the basin, what it would take to get water to that location really doesn't have a lot of benefit to it. It's not quite big enough, not quite close enough, not quite in the right place, and a lot of the flooding occurs upstream of there anyway. So it's just not that helpful. Rotolo Park could be improved. Right now it overflows. It overflowed in the subject storm significantly, and so there are improvements that could be made to that one so that it overtopped less frequently. And so we've included some costs on those as well. Let's back out of there. And then let's go to the graphic at the bottom, structures removed from the floodplain. So this shows a couple of different alternative storms. One is designing for the 25-year storm, one is designing for the 10-year storm. It also shows the existing conditions. And the two bars there, the blue bar represents number of homes that are in the inundation area, and the reddish bar indicates how many other structures. So there are a lot of other buildings besides houses where damage was significant, and specifically garages where people had valuables. At least one person had some classic cars that were totaled, some classic motorcycles, and so we know there was a significant amount of damage in other buildings, so we wanted to track those. The 25-year storm, you can see that goes from about 1,100 structures down to 724 structures, and about cuts the number of other structures in half. So I wanted to talk about this slide because the one thing that's missing is a 100-year storm evaluation. And a 100-year storm would be, let's take everybody out of the 100-year for 100% of the houses. That's certainly something we can add in. The decision was made as we were going into this to delete that because of a number of things. The size of the conduits and pipes that it would take to do that would be so large that they wouldn't fit within the existing infrastructure that's in the street. So where there's sanitary sewers, water lines, it flat just doesn't fit. So that project would entail replacement of not only the storm sewer, but a lot of sanitary sewer, a lot of water. And it just got to the point where the cost was so high that we just felt like it was not worth looking at. We certainly could pursue that avenue. It would take a lot more effort to try to quantify the amount of infrastructure to be replaced. But we could certainly go that direction. It's probably, for 75 here, that's probably 250 or 200, so a much bigger number. The other thing that we didn't do is we didn't look at what we would call transformative projects. So Emily, if you can find one of the maps, I just need just an aerial map. That's fine. So what I mean by transformative project is we have some open channel that already exists in there, but if you went out and purchased houses along the historic channel and purchased enough houses, you would not only take houses out of the floodplain and so not have that problem, but you also end up with a really spectacular greenway that gives everybody a open space access. Really, it could go almost down to the light rail. And so if that was done right as an open channel and a trail connection, it would be a phenomenal project for the city. Again, the cost of a project like that is quite significant, so we haven't included that sort of project here.
Councilmember Barentine.
I appreciate that you didn't include it because of the cost. Do you have any idea of how many homes that would include?
Well, on each block, it would probably be 3 to 4 houses on both sides of the street. So I would say at least 3 to 4. That would give us about 150 or 200 feet. So at $300,000 to $400,000 a house, it ends up being about $1 million per crossing or more. So it's not. The purchasing of those houses might be 25 to 50 million, and then you'd have to do all the channel improvements, box culverts at the crossings, the trail improvements, those kind of things.
For 4 houses?
Well, for 4 houses on each street. So
How many
there-
houses total were you
Well, so
anticipating?
just counting them here, roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10. To get you to Broadway, it's about 11 blocks. So, so it would be 8 houses times 11, so 88 houses, something like that. Yeah.
So I
It's-
think
it's
we'll
largely-
kind of go back to the PowerPoint so we can wrap up and then allow council some time for discussion. So if you jump back down to where I left off.
So again, we can provide hard copies of things if you feel better reviewing like all the text in hard copy. The maps really need to be looked at online because there's so much interactive nature to them. But we certainly can produce PDFs of some of those files as well
Oh, back one.
if we need to.
Councilmember Valentine.
Sorry. The problem is that you've anecdotally here given some suggestions, like have the city purchase 88 homes, if that's the correct number, and then the amount, and I didn't see any of that information in there, and it doesn't appear that that's necessarily on the website either. So those become things that we go, well, remember, and somebody will say, I saw the video and he said you guys could buy some homes and make a greenway, and then that's not in the study, it's not in the information we're being given. And so yes, that would be helpful to make sure that we have more of a report that is a little bit more, has all of the information that you're providing here, because I think it's unfair to make these kind of statements for us to discuss things here when it's neither in the report or on the website, and people have been exposed to it, so then we have nothing else to go back on. So I would like that hard copy. I would like a report so that we have all of that information, including what you've discounted as maybe too expensive, so that we have all of the options to make some decisions on whether we want to do things partially or in whole. And since they've already been explored, at least spoken here, that would be important.
Thank you. I would assume that everybody wants it. Anybody in disagreement? That we all agree? Yeah. So anything that you have thought is outlandish, I think we want all ends of this, and maybe it doesn't need to be on your interactive map in the same way, but at least the data's there and we can say what it was.
All right, so as we mentioned, we looked at the 5, 10, 25, and 100-year storm events. We focused on the 10 and 25-year events because we thought that was the most cost-effective, again, bang for your buck sort of thing. And so the 2A, 2B, 3A, and 3B there is what was focused on to come up with costs, relative costs, to achieve that level of protection. The 5-year storm, it was felt that if we're going to go out to all this work to put in infrastructure, tear up the streets, put in pipes, we might as well put in the ones for a 10-year storm as opposed to a 5. And as was mentioned about the 100-year storm, the size of those pipes is so astronomical that we don't feel that we have room within the right-of-way to facilitate those improvements. So this is a map that we had shown previously in the website. It's just at a very small scale. Similarly is the proposed project. So as we saw in detail, the different segments relate to different colors, and those are outlined in this cost summary table. So as recommended, you can see there, the first set of projects, which is the most expensive, are the south projects, S1 through S4. So S1 comprises the pipe from Navajo all the way out to the South Platte, and you can see that's a very significant cost. Similarly, then, we would work our way upstream within the south area from S2, S3, and S4. S3 is the section along bordering each side of Broadway adjacent to the Acoma and Bannock area. And then subsequently make our way down the list. So the total costs there, as you can see, depending again on whether you go with the 10-year storm capacity or the 25-year capacity with or without detention, ranges from 37 million up to a high of just under 76 million. And this was the graphic. It just showed up in a different color, but again, showing how many properties are taken out of the flood-prone area or are no longer subject to flooding if we implemented all of those projects at that particular level. And then project prioritization. So as Greg mentioned, really the goal or typical of any project is you always work from the downstream up. So it doesn't make sense to push more water into the system if the downstream cannot handle it. So that was a lot of the philosophy behind how they prioritize those projects and why S1 comes up as a higher priority, because it's basically the bottom, the bathtub drain, the bottom of the funnel where everything comes to that point. So having that at its correct capacity makes a lot of sense rather than trying to fix the pieces upstream. Secondly, the capacity of the existing storm sewer. So how can we, again, focus on areas where we have existing storm sewer that has a lower capacity, and then how many structures are essentially removed by doing that particular project. So again there, as we mentioned, S1 through S4 would be the top 4 projects, followed by the South Central, and then subsequently working our way towards the north of the city. So our focus at this time, what we feel for in terms of the study next steps is we want to talk with council about determining if floodproofing should be an option or not. And if that remains on the table, if you remember, that's somewhere in that $2.5 to $5 million. And we could certainly, as we talked about in February, would that be where the city participates and the homeowner participates, or some combination of funding? What we want to do for the Oxford pipe is clean it out, first of all, and then complete that acoustic assessment of those areas where underneath all the sediment has built up, and basically that goes into a phase 2 condition assessment, and ultimately rehab that pipe where needed, or replace it if the pipe is undersized. And then finally with the OSP is determine our preferred alternative, meaning do we want to look for 25-year protection, 10-year protection, and then with or without detention. And do we concur, does council concur with the prioritization, or we should include other factors such as was mentioned, should we look at doing things upstream in order to provide protection more quickly, and then study what would be the effects downstream if we did something like that. Because obviously if we do something upstream more quickly, we don't want to force more water and flood more people downstream before doing that project. And then as we've talked about in our budget discussions, we would like to initiate design of that first project yet this year. And then finally, for the stormwater program as a whole, so the funding, as we've discussed, for stormwater is insufficient at this time. Whether we go with the 37 million or the 75 million, we don't have enough funding right now. So we really need to talk about where does that money come from, and we also have to look at the existing system as well. So we have a lot of pipes outside of that 3.4 square miles where we have storm sewer. Is it in the same condition as the Oxford pipe? Now they're not as large obviously, but do we have a lot of sediment buildup? Do we have pipes that are failing on the invert? We need to look at that, as well as potential for upgrading or replacing those, as well as assess the staffing, administrative, and maintenance needs. Right now we've devoted very little staff to maintaining our storm sewer, and that needs to change. Where does the funding then come to fund those staff? And then we have the Dry Gulch project costs, which are kind of in the northeast portion of the city. Of course, a lot of that is hinged on Denver completing their portion of Harvard Gulch, but that's another $19 million of storm sewer improvements that would be on the city to complete. So our interest is going forward to conduct a fee study including all of those costs, what we've shown you tonight, and the direction back from council, as well as some of these other items, so that we could come back with a rate increase and ultimately issue bonds to fund those costs against that future rate increase. So with that, I'll summarize, or I'll stop talking and turn it over to council for questions and discussion.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work that you've all put into this and the time that you've taken. And despite the fact that the map wasn't interactive and available to us, I'm really thankful that this has become very open, and there's a lot of data that's being made public here, and I really appreciate that. Mayor Pro Tem Russell starts us out.
The question that I have, has Denver even started on their portion of the Dry Gulch project?
They have not. Their focus has been, if you're familiar with widening of I-70 that's occurring kind of in the east side of town, they've devoted all of their stormwater resources to fixing improvements over in that range. So we still have not received a definitive answer from Denver as to their timeline for Harvard Gulch.
So the bottom line is that's probably not on our priority list either.
Correct.
Okay.
Because again, we're kind of on the upstream side of that, so to force more water downstream is ineffective.
However, we can do home-by-home storm mitigation for that area, right?
Certainly,
So
absolutely.
they could do as much as they could in the meantime. It's not ideal. So I have a question about urban drainage and where they fit in with this. This isn't done all alone, so how have they weighed in on this? What kind of perspective do they have?
Yeah, we actually met with them last week, and I don't know, Greg, if you can summarize that meeting. They have fairly limited funds as well, and their intent is, so for Arapahoe County, they would have to spread all the money that they accumulate from their tax for Arapahoe County and try and give it to multiple projects. So while they might have some funding, it's really a drop in the bucket when we're talking about tens of millions of dollars for our improvements. But that is a possibility. I don't know if you wanna speak to that.
I think the key thing with the urban drainage is they have a certain amount of money for Arapahoe County, and that's limited based on their tax base, and they try to distribute money as much as they can in the jurisdictions where the taxes were collected. So they have a small budget for these types of projects. They do typically do a 50% match, so they will contribute
15
as they
or
can.
50?
50.
50%,
5-0.
5-0
Yeah.
match.
So I think that was the really the biggest takeaway from that meeting. They'll eventually review this technically, but they haven't looked at it technically yet.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine.
The PowerPoint, quite honestly, most of that was what was presented before as well, when we had the how do you flood-proof stuff. And so I'm interested, looking forward to looking at the whole study and in the information, because the end here, doing the prioritization and where we should go and projects, can be determined by this council until we've seen all of the information, or at least not for me. What I did want to ask on the conclusion for the paper that you provided, Director, is that staff will review the results of the study and discuss next steps for both the study and the stormwater program as a whole. As I understand, since the public nor council has access to this, staff probably hasn't either. And so what's your timeline for being able to go ahead and review this study so that we can get a better idea of what we should prioritize and spend money on?
Staff has reviewed it. It was in draft, provided to us by the end of May. So staff has provided comments as recently as the end of last week to Calibre. And so it's our
Oh,
intent.
I'm sorry, I'm referring to the June 10th information, council communication, and that's the conclusion that you provided. So I thought we were going to get something that, by that statement that I just read, that we were going to get something a little more formalized based off of the study, which would mean that you haven't had access to it because it doesn't exist yet. So when's your timeline for doing that piece of it and reporting back to council?
Certainly. So what I meant by that is staff will review with the council at this meeting the results of the study. So we have, as I mentioned, staff has reviewed that. myself, the engineering manager, and the capital
So
projects
you
manager.
have access to this PowerPoint?
We do, yes.
How long have you had access to that?
Since I believe the end of May.
Thank you.
In that
Council-
case, just when is the report from you going to come to council on that? 'Cause
There is no
that's-
separate report, so the intent
Huh.
was to review the report, the study, with council at this meeting tonight. So we were given a draft so that we could provide, you know, do this, do that, let's tweak this, how this particular text reads, add a map here, that sort of thing is what we went through.
Oh, I think it's way more than technical. There's a lot of information and anecdotal pieces that brought up that are very instrumental in how we're going to move forward to prioritize or what our options are. And I need to know when we're going to be able to redo that. If you aren't going to be providing anything else, then I think we're kind of have a problem. So I don't know how to move forward because I can't do what she's
All right,
asking.
we'll hold on to that question. Let's move to Member Cuesta.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll beg everybody's pardon on my summer cold that I'm fighting through. Can we go back to the layered web-based map entitled Flood Depths 5 Years? I believe you were using one that was the web-based version.
Okay.
Do you still have access to that you could bring up? It was the Flood Depths 5 Year was the, that's what I have in quotes as the title name. And I believe that was it. But you were able to zoom in on that Acoma area that was hit in July 2018.
Can you go back to the website, Emily? Yeah, that's fine. Oh, it's not showing up on the...
It's, yeah, unfortunately, it's not up on the screen. We need to do a, there you go.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I appreciate you going back to that. So I understand the color coding. How is that? So you've got your 0 to a half a foot to a foot. What are the factors that go into that rating? I assume it's obviously the drainage that's available there. Is there also something to do with the architecture of the house?
Not really, no. That is really important, but this map, what we did is we took the depth of water at any given location, and that came off of the topographic LiDAR map that we got from Dr. Cog. And then similarly, the elevation of the house at the ground around the house. So that's what that's showing is there's about 0 to 5 foot of water against the wall of the house according to the LiDAR mapping. And again, you know, there's inaccuracies in that. There's various different things that those topographic maps just can't get to the level of detail. But there are architectural considerations that you know, that the homeowners will have to take into account, because there are a lot of houses that have sort of a garden level basement, and there are ones that don't have a garden level. The ones with garden level basement, that means that their ceiling in their house is higher than the ground floor. So you could actually have ponding several feet deep before the entire basement was completely full of water. So there really are important architectural considerations like that. For people whose basement, the ceiling of their basement is actually closer to the existing ground, it takes a lot less water against their foundation to fill up their entire basement. So.
Thank you. We've heard, and you know, we've been analyzing this for close to a year now. I've heard a lot of different estimations on what level flood it was in July of 2018 in this area. I believe I did hear you say that was a 100-year flood, as far as your group has calculated.
There were
that.
some 100-year rainfalls measured.
And where that is within this vicinity here that we're discussing, this the Acoma-Bannock area?
I'd have to look back at where the exact rain gauge location was.
And that will be on this website as well, that we'll be able to go in and access that?
Well, no, I don't think that right now that we've got it on there, as far as I know, but we can certainly add that.
The closest rain gauge, I believe, was over in Sheridan, and so urban drainage used that data to approximate what happened in this area. And we can certainly add that little report from urban drainage to the website.
That would be helpful for me. I appreciate that. And then I've got a few more follow-up questions, but just one more I'd like some clarification on, because I think that, different folks have had different results. You're under the impression that anybody should be able to get flood insurance?
Yeah, within this area, that's my understanding. We did talk to urban drainage about that. We also talked to FEMA about that. And my understanding is, yeah, that there are a few things that would kick you out of the program, I guess, if you've already had a claim on your house on flood insurance, and that claim amounts to more than 50% of the value of the home, then you probably can't get flood insurance. So that there are a few conditions that would apply, but almost everybody here would probably not be in that circumstance.
Excuse me. Thank you. And I did see FEMA FEMA cited in the presentation. So that would be the issuer of the insurance?
Could you repeat that?
You bet. So FEMA would be the issuer of the insurance as you're
no.
describing it?
No, FEMA administers the program, but there are private insurance companies that issue flood insurance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
Not
getting-
everyone.
That's where I'm hearing, at least I've heard from some neighbors that they've had some difficulty. I'll look into that a little bit further, but I might even follow up with you privately on that one.
Yeah, and I certainly can't speak for the insurance companies.
Sure.
Because they do have rules, and but our understanding is that they've kind of lightened up on their rules rather than tightening them up, and there's more companies offering it. So
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Martinez next.
Thanks for sharing these interactive maps. I'm excited to get my hands on them and kind of dig around. Particularly the 5-year flood map is really eye-opening. That's really a lot more severe than I thought that it was. When we share this out with citizens, they're able to find their property. They just go into each of the map and then zoom into their neighborhood and locate their house. There's not like an address search or anything that they can use.
I don't think so.
Okay.
no, right now it's just in the map.
Okay.
yeah.
And then my second question is, in the project's kind of outline, how do we go about determining whether the right option is with detention or without detention? It looked like there was not a lot of options for detention. So how would we go about determining which solution would be the best for our city?
Yeah, I think that's where we can get into some more detail on recommendations. The cost difference is pretty slight. If you look between for example, the 10-year between it's about $3 million. But the difference is then that we're going to have smaller pipes in the ground because now you're holding some of that water back. The cons of that is that we have, at least for a short period of time, we have the parks inundated with stormwater. So we would obviously put up signage and stuff. This wouldn't be long-term detention where there's a permanent pond there. It'd probably be in the order of 48 to 72 hours where the ground would be have water to hold back. So I think there's some pros and cons there that we can get into later on.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
I believe you said that the flooding in the 2018 storm spread beyond the flooding in the 1998 storm, or at least the map.
The map, right?
Okay, so what changes in the outfall system plans are we anticipating from the 1999 study, or are we anticipating changes?
Well, the biggest change is that this is a lot more widespread than the 1999. There were very few projects that were identified in that, and we're really recommending much more significant and widespread improvement.
So I guess I'm asking, is it possible that had we done the 1999 study, this flood wouldn't have impacted us if we had spent the money back then? Is it worse because we did nothing?
Well, absolutely, had you done something then, you would have had less flooding. But from my recollection of the 1999 projects, there, you still would have had significant problems.
Okay, and then I noticed that the map, the interactive map between the 10-year and the 25-year is significant. I mean, what if we did the 10-year plan? It would mitigate some of what's going on in the 25-year. Do you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, and when you get into the maps, there are maps that show the inundation area. There's also maps that show buildings and building depths. And so by looking at those, you can kind of see how we're changing, how the flood inundation area is changing as you go to higher protection. And you know, there's not a, I guess when I look at it, one of the things that strikes me is it would be nice to have a point in time where you see, wow, this jumping from 10-year to 25 really is hugely impactful. It's not really that way. There's a little bit of impact on each one, and but there's not a massive difference between the 5-year and 25, and I think those bar charts kind of bear that out too.
I think it's the, beyond the bar charts, let's say we did the 10-year protection. The extra benefit then is that there's lower, even though there's homes that still might be flooded, it's to a lesser degree that water comes down. And so they're not completely protected, but there's less inundation, less volume or depth against their foundation.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question. Are you going to have recommendations for the city about houses that cannot do anything to flood-proof? I'm assuming there are a certain number of houses in this area that no amount of flood-proofing would help them.
I would say that that's not technically correct, but effectively, yeah, if you've got 3 foot of water against your house, you're probably gonna, in order to flood-proof it, you would have to jack the house up, change it completely architecturally. That's been done. It's been done a lot on the East Coast, so it's not something that's not. But here, there's not a lot of people that do jacking. In a small neighborhood like that, your house would stick out like a sore thumb, and it would need a lot of architectural treatment to fix. Probably be more effective to purchase those sorts of houses.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I, just to follow up on that, I think if that was direction that council wanted us to investigate further, we certainly could.
Okay, thank you very much.
So council, it seems like we need to give some direction on what's next. It sounds to me like we need to have a special session, sometime a special study session again to do this. Whether it's a Monday night when we have a study session in the next, I don't know, cycle, I would probably are going to have to add another night, I think, for this to do a next steps process. But tonight, what I would like to do is the Oxford pipe assessment is $600,000, right?
Yeah, I think that's on the conservative side, but yes, to go forward, to clean it and do that phase 2 assessment, get the debris out of there so we can really see what's going on, would be that next step.
That's your first next step.
Correct.
To me, I would love to see something come forward to us doing that, and then we debate it. But I think let's take some next first step, and then the next are all of these. This chart you have here, you have a number of recommendations or possible ways we could go. Perhaps that's where our next study session goes, and we start to group them to figure out what is next then. And we have to do some serious funding considerations with this. I don't think any of this is really anecdotal. We have some pretty serious data here. We've had it already from residents telling us what's going on. Now you have the science behind it to say, indeed, this is what's going on. I would love to see, plan A, plan B, plan C. You've sort of started that with this, but my hunch is that we need to have some kind of another second study session. The other piece I would love to see come forward, if others do, is to come up with some ideas about determining city funding for floodproofing of homes, whether it's a low interest, no interest loan that's available, like we do with some of our other projects we've done with CDBG type grant type things. I would love to see what our options are there. The third one is the OSP update. that's where I think the majority of our time is going to have to be spent for the next study session. Does that make sense to you, Director DeAndre?
Absolutely, and then I think around those different plans or options, list the pros and cons as well, because I think the nuances will be where council will have to make those hard decisions, and so you need a little bit more detail there about what happens, this and that.
So I appreciate the work that's been done in this, and this is really not weird, this is new for all of us to get a 3D report, basically, is what you've provided us. You've given us three-dimensional report, which is not a normal way that all people consume information. So if we could get, whatever you can make PDF'd, and maybe that's going to be, flash drives that are available to council and in the library or whatever, I don't know what other forms of, but to be able to do some PDFs on some of this for people to consume it in ways that they're used to. But the 3D, I think, is going to be important for all of us to be able to play around. My question is, can you make this public now as a draft so we can all do it and in real time with some of our residents who need to look at it and understand it?
Yes, we'll post that tomorrow morning on the city's website.
And is there some sort of a draft signal that this is still in progress? We might be tweaking some things? I mean, it sounds like the data comparison stuff is correct, but if we're going to add new things that we think are missing, or if we find something's just plain wrong, I don't know.
Well, we almost surely will find aspects of it that we want to tweak. Almost surely you guys will have input that we want to change some things. We talked about some of the things tonight that we need to add to the text. So there will be for sure ongoing changes. And it's just a question of whether, to what level are you guys comfortable doing that? And we're fine.
Okay, that's great. Mayor Pro Tem Russell.
Excuse me. I have a couple of questions I think that we need to deal with also is what type of funding sources do we have available? I mean, I'm assuming that the $600,000 would not be as big a deal. I mean, I think that there may be money in that fund, but if we were even thinking about moving forward with any piece of this, how do we fund it? I mean, and what is the deadline if we wanted to put something on the ballot for a bond issue?
So my understanding to that last question is that we're not, and perhaps interim city manager can correct me if I speak incorrectly, but we're not, because it's an enterprise fund, we're not tied to the ballot election, that instead we would pursue just communication and public input and then go forward at the direction of council once they felt comfortable doing some sort of rate increase. So it wouldn't be tied to a ballot initiative.
Thank you.
Councilmember Berentine?
I am disappointed to hear that the staff had this available to them and that it was not made available to the public and to council prior to this meeting to make this meeting a more worthwhile use of our time. However, I didn't get a chance to ask you for the several issues that came up that you had said here in this meeting, but said were not presented there or in this study. How long will it take you to go ahead and incorporate that information?
It seems like it's just a few things, so it's just writing a paragraph describing what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think.
Well, 88 homes isn't a little thing to those 88 homes, so,
Well,
I mean,
no,
it's
don't
an
mean to-
important piece of it in
No,
us
I'm
making a
just- I'm just
decision.
in terms of our effort,
Right.
it's not a big effort.
So about a week?
Yeah, so within a week for sure.
Okay, and then as we're apparently, the mayor is asking maybe some of this be segmented into different choices, can you include some of those other options so that we know how many houses you would recommend either be scraped and that they shouldn't be built, that nothing should be built in that area, or that we would have to purchase, or how many homes you think should have the option to be raised up instead, so that at least people know some of the options that are available. And I'm assuming you could probably do that within that week period as well?
We also talked about, there are so many solid fences that's something that you guys probably should think about too with your code is in these areas not allowing fences to be back-to-back cedar planks, but offset or separated so that water can move freely through and doesn't.
And that
create-
would be on properties that you wouldn't be considering that the house should be scraped or maybe should have never been built in the first
Right.
place, or removed or stilted, but properties then that could potentially just be the fence issue for that property, is what you're saying.
It would be any property within the flood inundation area. If you guys were gonna demo those properties, purchase them, then you wouldn't obviously do anything with the fences there. But for any properties that you don't purchase or and are still in the flood inundation areas, then I think you'd wanna consider changes to your fence code.
Well, not only that, but then obviously some building codes as well, because if we're already identifying that they're high flood and that the fence would be cause more problem than good, then maybe we should be considering the property. So if you could include those as well in each of these segmented pieces. And also for, you made the comment about that Acoma property area in there that they probably flood all the time regardless of how much it rains. Am I going to be able to see that pretty well when I go on that website?
We can certainly describe it, but I think you'll be able to see it.
All right.
Yeah.
It'll give me an opportunity to work on it, and I do wish we had it. Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah.
Certainly not, this is a great beginning, certainly not your fault. Councilmember Cuesta.
Thank you. Councilmember Barentine asked that you bring back the recommendations, some of which include the potential, the scraping of these homes. My understanding is these are possibilities or approaches we could take. These are not recommendations, correct? And that language is very important to me, that we're saying something measured, that you're not recommending that we start knocking down 88 homes. Is that correct?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
So I think, again, that's sort of a out-of-the-box thinking. If council wanted to go there, we would present some information, but there is nothing on the table that says we're recommending acquiring properties at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for the clarifying question. All right. Director DeAndre, do you have what you need tonight to move us on to the next stage? And then Mayor Pro Tem and I will try and figure out where we're going to fit this in for the next, because we have a lot of work ahead of us, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a great discussion and a great opening segue to the very complicated topic.
Thank you very much. All right, we will adjourn and move into the room next door in 5 minutes.